Christmas Eve, 1969. A force 9 gale is hammering the English Channel. Cherbourg is dark and quiet, most of the city at Christmas dinner. Inside the French naval shipyard, 5 armed missile boats sit at their moorings, paid for in full, legally owned by Israel, held in place by a presidential embargo that Charles de Gaulle imposed with a single declaration. Then, just after midnight, their engines start. 80 Israeli sailors, who had arrived by train over the previous 3 days in civilian clothes carrying false identities, cast off the lines and pointed the bows south into the Atlantic. A 3,000-kilometer escape route had been plotted in advance. Zim shipping freighters crewed by Israelis were already at sea, some equipped to refuel the small boats at night in the Bay of Biscay. Paris would wake up to find the boats gone. They would protest. The legal paperwork was airtight enough that nothing could be done. This is not just the story of a heist on the Atlantic coast. It is the story of how a country with 273 kilometers of coastline, no shipbuilding tradition, and no reliable arms supplier, built a naval force that sold itself to the world. 21 vessel classes. 8 decades. A doctrine built on the principle that the best marketing tool a defense industry can have is an arms embargo, because embargoes prove the technology is threatening enough to ban. Chapter 1. Destroyers, and the lesson that cost 47 lives. Israel declared independence in May 1948 with a navy that barely existed. The first vessels were surplus fishing boats, converted coastal steamers, and whatever could be acquired quietly through front companies operating across 3 continents. Purpose-built warships were years away. By the mid-1950s, the Navy had acquired 2 former British Royal Navy destroyers of the Z-class, Eanes Eilat and Eanes Jaffa. Both were Second World War veterans. Both displaced 1,710 tons. Both carried guns designed for a doctrine the world was quietly discarding. Eanes Eilat became the centerpiece of Israeli surface power, a single destroyer standing in for a fleet that did not yet exist. For over a decade, that arrangement held. Then came the 21st of October 1967. INS Eilat was on routine patrol in international waters off the Egyptian coast near Port Said. The crew had no particular reason for concern. At approximately 1730, Egyptian Komar-class missile boats operating from inside the harbor fired Soviet P-15 Termit anti-ship missiles, NATO designation SS-N, 2 sticks, without ever entering visual range. The missiles found the Eilat without difficulty. The destroyer sank in international waters. 47 Israeli sailors were killed. 100 more were wounded. It was the first time in history that a warship was sunk in combat by a surface-launched anti-ship missile. Every navy in the world understood what this meant. Israel understood it more acutely than the rest, because Israel had just paid for the lesson with a ship and 47 lives. INS Jaffa, the second Z-class destroyer, was luckier. She was decommissioned without incident, her guns never tested in the kind of engagement that destroyed her sister. Together, the 2 destroyers represent the only chapter in Israeli naval history that generated no export, no derivative program, no commercial legacy, just a question. And that question had a very specific answer. Chapter 2. The Saar family, 6 classes, and the art of the steel. In the early 1960s, the Israeli Navy concluded it needed fast, small, missile-armed vessels. The first design work went to Germany's Lürssen shipyard, whose Jaguar-class fast attack craft was identified as the right starting point. But German politics made direct construction impossible, and the contract moved to Constructions Mécaniques de Normandie, a shipyard in Cherbourg. 6 Saar-1 boats were delivered from 1967 onward. Each displaced around 220 tons. 4 MTU diesel engines pushed them to 40 knots. The hull was conceived as a gun platform. Israeli engineers fitted it instead with a domestically developed anti-ship weapon that both the Army and the Air Force had already rejected as insufficiently interesting. The Gabriel missile, a decision those services would take years to stop regretting. The Saar-2 arrived alongside the Saar-1, evolutionary rather than revolutionary. Same 4-5-meter hull, same displacement, better sensors, Thompson CSF Neptune surveillance radar paired with Selenia Orion fire control, giving commanders the ability to engage targets beyond visual range for the first time. 6 boats built, 3 more converted from Saar-1 hulls in 1974. The last one did not retire until 1997. 30 years of service from a hull designed at a French shipyard for a customer that France would soon try to block. Then France cut off the supply, and Israel took the boats anyway. The Saar-3 was the Cherbourg boat, the stolen boat. The same 4-5-meter hull, the same 220 tons, now armed with the Gabriel and backed by electronic warfare systems that were about to change naval history. 7 hulls had slipped out before de Gaulle's 1967 embargo. 5 remained in the French yard when the second embargo came in 1969. The Christmas Eve operation, codenamed Noah after the daughter of Captain Binyamin Telem, brought all 5 home. On the 6th of October 1973, the Saar-3 went to war at the Battle of Latakia, the first naval engagement in history fought entirely between surface-to-surface, missile-equipped fast patrol boats. The Syrians fired first, 8 to 12 Styx missiles at long range. Every one missed. Captain Harut Semek had guessed the Styx radar frequency correctly and designed his countermeasures around that guess. When the Israelis closed to Gabriel range, 5 missiles destroyed all 3 Syrian boats. The Syrian Navy returned to port and stayed there. That victory funded the argument for everything that followed. The Saar-4, known as the Saar-class, was the first missile boat designed and built entirely in Israel, at Israel shipyards in Haifa, from 1973 onward. It displaced around 450 tons, reached 32 knots, and carried both the Gabriel II and the American RGM-84 Harpoon. Israeli tacticians called the combined engagement the cocktail. 2 missiles, 2 different guidance frequencies, fired simultaneously at the same target to defeat whatever countermeasures the enemy deployed. 10 Saar-4 boats were built for Israel, 3 more at Haifa for South Africa, under a 1,974 contract. 6 more built in Durban under Israeli supervision, while an international arms embargo on apartheid South Africa was already in force. Chile bought its first Saar, 4 inches, 1,979. Sri Lanka followed. By 2014, Israel had sold almost its entire Saar-4 fleet abroad and retained only 2 boats until their decommissioning that year. Few programs in naval history sold themselves as completely as the Saar-class. The Saar 4.5 stretched the hull to 61.7 meters and 488 tons, splitting into 2 distinct subclasses. The Aliyah variant added a helicopter capability. The Hetz variant packed 8 Harpoon missiles, 16 Barak, 1 surface-to-air missiles, and a Phalanx CIWS, alongside the OTO Melara 76mm gun, matching the weapons density of many contemporary frigates at less than half the displacement. In January 2004, both Aliyah subclass boats, INS Aliyah and INS Geula, were sold to Mexico as Arm Huracan and Arm Tormenta. Gabriel systems included. The Hellenic Coast Guard bought 3 unarmed patrol variants of the same hull. 8 Hetz subclass boats remained in Israeli service into the 2020s, still being upgraded while the replacement program was finalized. Then the Saar family crossed the Atlantic. The Saar-5, designated the Eilot class in Israeli service, was built at Ingalls Shipbuilding in Pascagoula, Mississippi, at roughly $260 million per hull. 3 corvettes, 85.6 meters long, 1,275 tons standard displacement, combined diesel or gas propulsion with a General Electric LM-2500 gas turbine for sprint speeds of 33 knots. Everything above the waterline was Israeli: ELTA radar, Elbit electronic warfare, Israeli data link architecture, the first helicopter hangar ever fitted to an Israeli surface combatant. American hull, Israeli brain, the pattern established at Cherbourg, refined at Pascagoula. On the 14th of July 2006, INS Hanot was on patrol off Beirut when a C-802 missile with an upgraded Iranian radar seeker struck the corvette near the helicopter deck. 4 crew were killed. The fire burned for 4 hours, then was extinguished. INS Hanot returned to Ashdod under her own power. That last fact appeared in every Saar-5 export pitch that followed. The Saar-6 went to Germany. 4 corvettes contracted in May 2015 from German Naval Yards Holdings and ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems, Germany, covering roughly 1/3 of the €430 million cost per hull. 90 meters, 1,900 tons at full load. The hull, loosely based on the German Braunschweig-class design, but structurally rebuilt around Israeli weapons that have no German equivalent. 16 Gabriel V anti-ship missiles, 32 vertical launch cells for Barak, 8 surface-to-air missiles, and 40 cells for the Sea Dome system. The first naval adaptation of land-based Iron Dome, the first time that proven rocket defense technology moved from a truck battery on a hilltop to a warship at sea. INS Magen was handed over in December 2020. All 4 were in Israeli hands by July 2021. Chapter 3. The Shimrit, the hydrofoil that proved where the limit was. After Yom Kippur, someone asked a simple question. What if the boat was simply too fast to hit? A hydrofoil rides above the water on underwater foils, presenting a hull that barely contacts the surface and moves faster than most sea-skimming missiles were designed to reliably engage. The concept had already been tested. Grumman built a working prototype for the U.S. Navy, the Flagstaff, designation PGH-1, which reached 50 knots in trials before the Americans abandoned the program for budgetary reasons. Israel contracted Grumman's Lantana shipyard in Florida to pick up where the Americans had stopped. The lead vessel, INS Shimrit, meaning Guardian, was designated Design M161, an 8.4-foot all-aluminum hull, powered foil-borne by a 5,400 horsepower Allison 501 KF gas turbine with a design speed of 52 knots. The second boat, INS Livnit, was built in parallel at Israel shipyards in Haifa, the first hydrofoil ever constructed on Israeli soil. The original program called for 12 to 15 hulls. It delivered 2. Neither reached 52 knots. 47 was the maximum in trials. Operationally, 42 to 45 was more typical. The turning radius at speed was 200 meters, a genuine tactical problem in the confined engagements the Israeli Navy was built around. Maintenance intervals were frequent. Operational costs were high relative to what the platform delivered. Both boats were sold for scrap by September 1991, having served barely 8 years. No export customers, no licensed derivatives, no successor program. The Shimrit is the only vessel class in Israeli naval history that confirmed a boundary rather than extending one. It did not generate a product, it cleared a runway. The Saar-5 program was already in motion, and the Shimrit had just confirmed that the corvette, not the hydrofoil, was the right direction. Chapter 4. Below the Surface, From a Lost Submarine to a Nuclear Question. The surface fleet was never the entire story. Israel acquired its first submarine capability in 1965, through the purchase of 3 modernized British T-class boats from the Royal Navy, INS Leviathan, INS Dakar, and INS Dolphin. World War II construction, Super T conversion, pushing 20 years of age at the point of sale. They were bought to build operational submarine experience, not to serve as a permanent capability. INS Dakar departed Portsmouth on the 9th of January 1968 under the command of Major Yaakov Ra'anan, carrying 69 men on her maiden voyage to Haifa. Her last confirmed position was logged on January 24, south of the eastern tip of Crete. The final radio transmission was received 18 hours later. No distress signal was ever sent. 1 year after the loss, Dakar's emergency position buoy washed up on the Gaza coast. The wreck was not found until 1999, located between Cyprus and Crete, at a depth of approximately 3,000 meters. The exact cause remains unknown. The most probable hypothesis involves a crash dive exercise gone wrong. Nothing recovered from the wreck has confirmed it. 69 men. The loss changed everything about how Israel thought about submarines. No more aged foreign hulls bought as stopgaps. The next program would be purpose-designed from the start. That program was the Saar-class. 3 boats, designed by Germany's HDW and built at Vickers Shipyard in the United Kingdom between 1973 and 1977. Modified Type 206, a coastal submarines, each displacing approximately 600 tons submerged. Optimized for Mediterranean shallow water operations and the specific requirements of Israeli doctrine. INS Gal launched December 1975. INS Tanin, October 1976. INS Rahav, May 1977. The class served through the Lebanon conflict in the 1980s. Providing intelligence collection and special operations insertion. No export program, no commercial legacy. But 20 years of accumulated submarine doctrine that made everything after it possible. What came after was the Dolphin class. 3 boats from HDW in Kiel, INS Dolphin, INS Leviathan, INS Tacoma, commissioned between 1999 and 2000. The naming was deliberate. Dolphin and Leviathan recycled the names of the T-class boats that had been Israel's first submarines. Tecuma, meaning revival in Hebrew, was a memorial to INS Dakar and the 69 men still on the seafloor. Germany donated 2 hulls outright and split the cost of the third with Israel, a financing arrangement without precedent in German arms export history. Each Dolphin, 1 boat displaces 1,640 tons surfaced and 1,900 tons submerged, 57 meters long, diesel-electric propulsion to 20 knots, and 10 torpedo tubes, 6 standard 533 mm and 4 enlarged 650 mm tubes, whose official purpose Israel has never explained. In June 2002, former U.S. State Department and Pentagon officials confirmed that the U.S. Navy observed Israeli missile tests in the Indian Ocean in 2000 and that Dolphin-class submarines had been fitted with nuclear-capable cruise missiles. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied this. Intelligence assessments put the warhead yield at approximately 200 kilotons, range estimated at over 1,500 kilometers. Sufficient to reach Tehran from a submerged position in the eastern Mediterranean. Whether the weapon is a modified Harpoon, a modified Gabriel 4LR, or the domestically developed Popeye turbo cruise missile, no official source has said. 4 torpedo tubes wider than they should need to be. That detail is the entire Dolphin program summarized. The Dolphin, 2 class extended the concept. 3 boats. INS Tanin, commissioned September 2014, INS Rahav, January 2016, and INS Drakon, launched August 2023 and currently completing sea trials. The Dolphin, 2 displaces 2,050 tons surfaced and 2,400 tons submerged, 68.6 meters long, fitted with air-independent propulsion, based on HDW's hydrogen fuel cell system. AIP submarines can remain submerged quietly at low speed for weeks without snorkeling, which is the moment a conventional boat is most vulnerable. INS Drakon, the largest of the 6 Dolphin-class boats ever built, features a lengthened sail that independent analysts have consistently assessed as likely housing a vertical launch system. Neither Germany nor Israel has commented. In January 2022, Israel contracted ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems for 3 Saar-class submarines at approximately €3 billion, the largest naval procurement contract in Israeli history. The class is named after the boat that vanished in 1968. The worst failure in Israeli submarine history names the most capable program the country has ever built. Chapter 5. The Patrol Boat Program, Selling Coastal War to the World. While the Saar family and the submarines defined what the Israeli Navy could do, a parallel program was building something different, a commercial proposition that any navy in the world could afford. The Dabur, Hebrew for Hornet, entered Israeli service in 1973, 35 tons standard displacement, 19.8 meters, 29 knots on 2 General Motors diesel engines, twin Oerlikon 20mm cannons, 12.7mm machine guns, Mark 46 torpedo tubes, depth charges, built for a specific threat, Palestinian infiltration by sea along Israel's coastline. The first 12 hulls were built by Seward Seacraft in the United States. All subsequent production moved to IAI's Ramta division in Israel. As newer designs replaced them in Israeli service, displaced Dabur boats were sold to South American navies. The commercial template was established: build for Israel, operate in a live threat environment, then export the validated product to navies that need exactly that operational endorsement on the specification sheet. Few people write about the Dabur, but without it, none of what came next exists. The Dvora class refined that template: 45 tons, 21.8 meters, 37 knots through Arneson ASD 1.6 articulating surface drives, a propulsion technology that significantly improved maneuverability in the shallow coastal water where these boats were expected to operate. The Dvora entered Israeli service in 1988 and was simultaneously marketed to the Sri Lanka Navy, which was fighting an urgent and specific problem. The Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam were using the sea as their primary logistics network, moving weapons and personnel between India and the Sri Lankan coast through a dense web of small, fast boats. Sri Lanka acquired 12 Dvoras between 1982 and 1988 and deployed them in sustained combat against LTTE sea assets, providing Ramta with a combat endorsement in a completely different geographic and tactical environment from the one the design was built for. Taiwan's CSBC Corporation built a licensed derivative under the designation Haiyu class and fitted it with anti-ship missiles. Israel provides the platform. The operator adds the weapons. The result exceeds what was in the brochure. The Super Dvora Mark II entered service in 1996. Hull stretched to 25.4 meters, displacement to 60 tons, top speed raised to between 45 and 52 knots, placing it among the fastest armed patrol boats in service with any navy at that scale. Sri Lanka again took the majority of export production and used the boats in active combat through the 1990s and 2000s. Slovenia acquired one boat named Ankaran for NATO coastal patrol duties. The Typhoon Stabilized Weapons Station, a Rafael remotely operated cannon mount capable of carrying a 25 to 30 mm gun and controlled entirely from inside the hull, became standard equipment from the Mark II onward. The Super Dvora Mark III entered Israeli service in 2004. Hull extended to 27.4 meters, displacement to 72 tons, top speed maintained at 45 knots, on updated Detroit diesel MTU engines driving the same Arneson surface drives. The weapons options expanded to AGM-114 Hellfire missiles and Spike NLOS precision-guided munitions alongside the Typhoon cannon, turning a 7.2-ton patrol boat into a genuine multi-role strike platform at a price point most navies could justify. Israel ordered 4 in 2002, 4 more in 2013, with an African military customer contracting 4 additional boats in 2015. The export list across all Super Devora marks grew to include Eritrea, Gambia, India, Paraguay, Slovenia, Sri Lanka, and Taiwan. Running alongside the Super Devora family, and in deliberate competition with it, was the Saar-class from Israel Shipyards, the other domestic company with a stake in Israeli patrol boat production. 25 meters, approximately 55 tons, Kamewa water jets, above 40 knots, the Typhoon 30mm cannon as primary armament. When the Israeli Navy placed its September 2006 fast patrol boat order, it split the contract between the Super Devora Mark III and the Shaldog, explicitly keeping both design lines active and both industrial bases funded. The Shaldog has since been exported to Nigeria, Romania, Argentina, the Philippines, Azerbaijan, Equatorial Guinea, Senegal, Cyprus, and Sri Lanka, 4 continents. 155-ton hull. Chapter 6. The Gabriel Missile, the weapon nobody else wanted. No account of the Israeli naval arsenal is complete without the weapon that ran through all of it. The Gabriel anti-ship missile was developed in the 1960s and rejected by the Israeli Army and rejected by the Israeli Air Force, both of which found it unsuitable for their requirements. The Navy accepted it. That single decision shaped every vessel class in this program. The Gabriel Mk-1 first saw combat in October 1973. Its semi-active radar homing guidance required the operator to illuminate the target throughout the missile's flight, a constraint that also made jamming it a visible act that revealed the jammer's position. At the Battle of Latakia, 5 Gabriel missiles destroyed 3 Syrian missile boats. 2 days later, at the Battle of Baltim, Israeli Saar boats used the same weapon against the Egyptian fleet in the first missile versus missile engagement in the Western Mediterranean. The Mark II entered service in 1976 with a 180-kilogram semi-armor-piercing warhead and extended range. Israel exported it to Taiwan, where it entered production as the Xun Feng-1, and to South Africa, where it became the Scorpio-N. 2 countries, 2 names, the same guidance architecture underneath. The Mach 3 arrived in 1980. Inertial navigation plus active radar seeker, true fire and forget, 3-5-kilometer range, no requirement to track the target after launch. An air-launched variant, the Mark III AS, entered service in 1982 and was certified on the A4 Skyhawk, the Kafir, the F4 Phantom, and Israeli Maritime Patrol aircraft, extending the same naval missile family into an air-delivered strike role. Between 2,500 and 3,000 Gabriels in all versions have been manufactured by published estimates. Current and recent operators include India, Finland, Mexico, Sri Lanka, Azerbaijan, Singapore, South Africa, and Taiwan. The Gabriel 5, the current advanced variant, carries an estimated range of 100 to 150 miles, roughly 4 times the original. The same weapon that started as a rejected development program in the 1960s is now in active service on 5 continents. The Gabriel was not a byproduct of the Saar program. The Saar program was built around the Gabriel. Every hull, every export sale, every license agreement traces back to the decision made by a Navy that had nothing to lose by accepting a missile nobody else wanted. Closing. The registry and what it means. Stand back and look at the complete inventory. 2 Z-class destroyers, one of which taught the world what anti-ship missiles could do by being sunk by one. 3 T-class submarines, one of which is still on the Mediterranean seafloor at 3,000 meters. The Saar family across 6 major classes, from 220 tons to 1,900 tons, from a French shipyard at midnight to a corvette assembled in Kiel with Iron Dome on the deck. The Gal-class submarines built in the United Kingdom. The Dolphin 1 and Dolphin 2 classes built in HDW Kiel the last of which is currently completing sea trials. The Shimrit hydrofoils, which proved an idea wrong and were scrapped in 1991. The Dabur, the Dvora, the Super Dvora MAK-2, the Super Dvora MAK-3, the Shaldog, a patrol boat family spanning 50 years and operating in every ocean, bought by navies fighting insurgencies, smugglers, and each other. In December 2024, the Ministry of Defense contracted Israel shipyards for 5 next-generation Reshef-class missile boats, $780 million, based on the Saar-72 design. 76 meters long, sea dome integrated, first delivery projected for 2028. And in January 2022, ThyssenKrupp signed the contract for 3 Dakar-class submarines at €3 billion, named for the boat that vanished in 1968 with 69 men aboard. The name Eilat is still in the Israeli fleet. It belongs to a corvette. The name Dakar is returning. It will belong to 3 submarines not yet in the water, named for 69 men still on the seafloor between Cyprus and Crete. That is what it means to build a navy from nothing in a region where miscalculation carries permanent consequences. The record they produced was not the result of geography or luck or an unconstrained defense budget. It was the result of one principle, applied without exception across 8 decades and 21 vessel classes. When no one will sell you what you need, build it yourself, and then sell it to everyone else.